The divorce papers were already printed. They sat untouched on the polished oak desk while rain hammered against the tall windows of the empty house. Every room echoed with silence except for the ticking grandfather clock in the hallway. Emily Carter stood alone in the study, her fingers trembling as she stared at the signature line where her name belonged. 3 years. 3 years of sharing a home with a man who had never truly been hers. 3 years of eating dinner across from him while conversation stayed polite, careful, almost professional. 3 years of wearing a wedding ring that everyone admired, even though neither of them had ever spoken the words, "I love you." She picked up the pen. Then the front door slammed. Footsteps echoed through the marble foyer faster than she had ever heard before. "Emily." His voice wasn't calm. It wasn't distant. It was afraid. She froze. The pen slipped from her fingers and rolled across the desk. For the first time since the day they married, Nathan Hale sounded like a man who was about to lose everything. But why now? What had changed in the 10 minutes since she decided to leave forever? 3 years earlier. Emily had never imagined that losing everything would begin with a single phone call. Her father's company had collapsed under impossible debt. Collectors circled like vultures. Their family home was about to be seized. The hospital bills for her younger brother grew larger every week. Every door she knocked on closed before she finished speaking. Until one offer arrived that didn't make sense. Nathan Hale. 34 years old. One of the youngest real estate investors in the city. Quiet. Respected. Wealthy beyond imagination. His lawyer didn't waste time pretending it was romantic. "Mr. Hale requires a legal wife for 3 years. Emily frowned. A legal wife? Nothing more. The older man slid a contract across the table. "You will live together. You will attend public events together. You will maintain the appearance of a genuine marriage. And after 3 years. He paused. "You are both free." Emily stared at the document. Why would anyone want this? The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "That information is private." "What do I receive?" "Every debt your family owes will disappear." Her breathing stopped. "And my brother's medical treatment?" "Paid in full." The room suddenly felt too small. Every instinct told her to stand up and leave. But another image appeared in her mind. Her father staring at foreclosure notices. Her mother pretending she wasn't crying. Her brother smiling through pain because he didn't want anyone worrying. Sometimes life didn't offer good choices. Only impossible ones. Nathan met her only once before the wedding. He arrived exactly on time. Dark gray suit. Calm expression. Perfect posture. There was nothing cruel about him. Nothing warm either. He extended his hand. "Thank you for agreeing." Emily forced a smile. "I don't know if congratulations are appropriate." A faint corner of his mouth lifted. "Probably not." The silence that followed was strangely comfortable. Not awkward. Simply empty. Nathan finally spoke. "There are only 3 rules." Emily looked up. "No questions about my personal life. You'll always have complete freedom inside the house. And when these 3 years end." His voice remained steady. "I won't ask you to stay. For some reason." That last sentence hurt more than she expected. Their wedding was beautiful. White roses. Soft piano music. Hundreds of guests. Expensive smiles. Photographers capturing every perfect moment. No one suspected the bride and groom had spoken fewer than 30 minutes in total. When Nathan gently placed the ring on her finger. His hand was warm. His eyes met hers for barely 2 seconds. Then he looked away. The applause filled the chapel. Emily smiled for every camera. Inside, she felt like an actress who had forgotten where the stage ended and real life began. Their new home overlooked the river. Large windows flooded every room with morning light. The staff treated Emily with genuine respect. Nathan insisted she redesign any room she wanted. If something doesn't feel like home, he told her, change it. Weeks passed. Then months. They developed routines without discussing them. Every morning, he left before sunrise. Every evening, they ate dinner together unless work kept him away. He always asked about her parents. He remembered her brother's appointments better than she did. He noticed when she looked tired. Yet he never crossed the invisible line between kindness and intimacy. He never touched her hand. Never kissed her except during public appearances. Never entered her room without knocking. Sometimes Emily wondered if he was simply incapable of loving anyone. Other nights, she wondered if someone had once broken him beyond repair. But the contract had been clear. No personal questions. So she never asked. Winter arrived. Snow covered the gardens outside. Emily found Nathan asleep in the library one evening. Documents lay scattered across the coffee table. His tie hung loose. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked exhausted. Not like the composed businessman the world admired. Carefully, she placed a blanket over him. She turned to leave. Without opening his eyes, Nathan quietly whispered, "Thank you." It was barely audible. Yet somehow, those two words stayed with her longer than expensive gifts or elegant dinners ever could. Months later, Emily baked cookies for the first time. The kitchen became a disaster. Flour covered every counter. Chocolate somehow ended up in her hair. Nathan walked in, stopped, and stared. She laughed nervously. "I may have underestimated this recipe." For 3 long seconds, he simply looked at her. Then something extraordinary happened. Nathan laughed. Not politely. Not quietly. A real laugh. Warm. Uncontrolled. Human. Emily blinked in surprise. "I didn't know you could do that." "What?" "Laugh." He shook his head, still smiling. "I suppose neither did I." For the rest of that evening, the mansion no longer felt enormous. It felt lived in. And for the first time, Emily forgot their marriage wasn't real. Spring brought unexpected headlines. Nathan and Emily became one of the city's favorite couples. Magazine covers praised their elegance. Business interviews called them inseparable. Friends envied what appeared to be the perfect marriage. Only they knew the truth. Every compliment felt strangely painful. Because pretending had slowly become easier than reality. One rainy afternoon, Emily visited her brother at the rehabilitation center. "You look happier," he said. She hesitated. "I think I'm just getting used to everything." He smiled knowingly. "No. You smile differently now." Emily looked away. "I don't think he loves me." Her brother remained quiet. Then asked softly, "Do you?" She couldn't answer. Because the silence already had. That night, Nathan returned home long after midnight. His shirt sleeve was stained with blood. Emily's heart nearly stopped. "What happened?" "It's not mine." He tried walking past. She stepped in front of him. "You need to tell me." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Instead, he sat down. A construction worker fell. I stayed until his surgery was over. Emily carefully cleaned the small cuts on his hands. Neither of them spoke. The room remained completely silent. Yet somehow, it felt more intimate than every conversation they'd shared over the past 2 years. When she finished wrapping the bandage, Nathan looked at her. Really looked at her. "You're too kind." Emily smiled sadly. "I could say the same about you." He almost replied. Almost. But whatever words reached his lips, he swallowed them. And the moment disappeared. The 3rd year arrived faster than either of them expected. The contract sat inside Nathan's office safe. Only 90 days remained. Emily began counting backward instead of forward. Every shared breakfast suddenly felt precious. Every quiet evening in the garden seemed impossible to forget. She started memorizing the sound of his footsteps. The way he loosened his tie after difficult meetings. The way he always thanked every member of the staff by name. She hated herself for noticing. Because none of it belonged to her. Not really. One evening, she overheard 2 employees whispering in the hallway. "They're perfect together. I hope they stay this happy forever." Emily closed her eyes. If only they knew. 2 weeks later, a woman appeared at the front gate. Elegant. Confident. Beautiful. She asked for Nathan by his first name. When he saw her, his expression changed in a way Emily had never witnessed before. Not joy. Not anger. Something heavier. The woman glanced at Emily before quietly saying, "We need to talk." Alone. Nathan hesitated for the first time since Emily had known him. Then he nodded. As the office door closed behind them, Emily stood alone in the hallway, unable to shake the feeling that whatever was being said inside would change all 3 of their lives forever. Emily tried not to listen. She really did. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, then realized she hadn't even turned on the kettle. The house felt different. Every second stretched longer than the last. She had never asked Nathan about his past. That had been one of the first rules of their agreement. But rules became difficult to follow when your heart was involved. Nearly an hour later, the office door opened. The woman walked out first. Her eyes were red, but her posture remained proud. She stopped in front of Emily. "So you're the wife?" Emily forced a polite smile. "I am." The woman studied her for several quiet seconds. Then she said something Emily would never forget. "I hope he finally learned how to let someone love him." Before Emily could respond, the woman walked away. Nathan stood in the doorway, watching her leave. For the first time in 3 years, he looked completely lost. That evening, dinner remained untouched. Nathan barely lifted his fork. Emily finally broke the silence. "Is she someone I should worry about?" He looked up. "No." "The past?" He nodded once. "Yes." Another silence settled between them. Emily almost asked more. Instead, she smiled weakly. "I promised I wouldn't ask questions." Nathan stared at her. "And you've kept that promise longer than anyone else." His voice carried something unfamiliar. Regret. The next morning, Emily found an old photograph lying on the library table. Nathan must have forgotten it. A younger Nathan stood beside the same woman. Both were smiling. Really smiling. On the back of the picture were only 5 handwritten words. "Don't stop living because of me." Emily gently placed the photograph exactly where she had found it. She didn't need an explanation anymore. Someone had once loved Nathan deeply. And somehow, he had lost her. Days passed. The distance between them grew strangely smaller. Nathan began coming home earlier. Sometimes they walked through the gardens after dinner without speaking. Other nights they watched old movies. Emily laughed when Nathan secretly hated every romantic ending. "They're unrealistic," he insisted. She smiled. Only because you're too practical. No. He looked at the screen. They end before life becomes difficult. Emily thought about that sentence long after the credits rolled. One rainy Saturday, the power went out across the neighborhood. The enormous mansion fell into darkness. Emily searched for candles while thunder rattled the windows. Nathan appeared carrying an old flashlight. I think the house feels better like this. She laughed. Without electricity? Without pretending everything has to be perfect. They sat beside the fireplace. No phones. No television. No meetings. No contracts. Just two people sharing the quiet. Nathan suddenly spoke. My mother hated storms. Emily listened without interrupting. When I was 10, she'd light candles and tell stories until I forgot to be afraid. He stopped. Emily realized something immediately. This was the first personal memory he had ever shared. What happened to her? Nathan stared into the fire. She died before I finished high school. Emily reached toward him without thinking. Her hand rested gently over his. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers slowly closed around hers. Neither of them spoke. Outside, thunder continued rolling across the sky. Inside, everything had changed. Only 30 days remained. Emily packed small boxes whenever Nathan was at work. Books. Photographs. Clothes. She told herself it would make leaving easier. It didn't. One afternoon, she opened a drawer she had never used before. Inside was a small velvet box. Confused, she lifted the lid. It wasn't jewelry. It contained dozens of tiny folded notes. Each carried a date. She unfolded the first. She smiled for the first time today. Another. She convinced the chef to make pancakes for everyone. Another. She still cries after speaking to her father, but pretends she doesn't. Emily's hands began shaking. There were hundreds of them. 3 years of observations. 3 years of moments. 3 years. Of Nathan quietly noticing everything. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned. Nathan stood frozen in the doorway. Neither of them moved. Finally Emily whispered. You kept these? He closed his eyes. I wasn't supposed to. Why? His answer came almost as a confession. Because writing them was easier than saying them. Tears filled her eyes. You said this marriage was only temporary. I believed it. And now? Nathan looked at her with the honesty she had waited 3 years to see. Now I don't know how to imagine my life without you. Emily wanted to run into his arms. She wanted to tell him she had loved him for longer than she dared admit. Instead, she remembered the papers. The contract. The ending they had both accepted. What happens when the 3 years are over? Nathan looked away. I made you a promise. You said you'd never ask me to stay. I know. And you always keep your promises. His silence answered her. It hurt because it was true. The final day arrived. The lawyer returned with the documents. Everything had been prepared. Property records. Financial transfers. Divorce papers. The agreement had been fulfilled exactly as written. Emily signed first. The pen felt heavier than it should. She slid the papers across the desk. Nathan picked them up. The lawyer waited. Minutes passed. Nathan never signed. Instead, he closed the folder. I can't. The lawyer blinked. Mr. Hale? I said I can't. He stood slowly. His voice remained calm, but his eyes betrayed him. I made this arrangement because I believed love only ended in loss. The room fell silent. 3 years ago, I thought keeping emotional distance would protect both of us. He turned toward Emily. I was wrong. Every word seemed to strip away years of carefully built walls. My fiancé died 6 months before our wedding. Emily's breath caught. I blamed myself. I convinced myself that loving someone only guaranteed pain. So I built a marriage with rules. A marriage where no one could get close enough to break my heart. His voice cracked for the first time. But somehow. He smiled through tears. You ignored every wall without ever trying to climb it. You filled a silent house with laughter. You treated my employees like family. You cared for people when nobody was watching. You made me remember the man I used to be. He stepped closer. I don't want a wife on paper anymore. I want my wife. Tears streamed down Emily's face. You promised you wouldn't ask me to stay. Nathan nodded. So I'm not asking. He took off his wedding ring. Placed it gently on the table. Then whispered. I'm asking if you'll marry me. The room became perfectly still. The lawyer quietly smiled before slipping outside and closing the door behind him. Emily laughed through her tears. You know. Nathan looked confused. You are unbelievably bad at romantic timing. He laughed. A real laugh. The same one she'd heard in the kitchen years before. She stepped forward. Picked up the ring. Slipped it back onto his finger. Then wrapped both arms around him. I thought I was only your wife on paper. Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I spent 3 years pretending the paper mattered more than my heart. She kissed him before he could say another word. This time. There were no photographers. No guests. No contract. No audience. Only 2 people finally choosing each other. 6 months later, they stood inside a small chapel overlooking a lake. No reporters. No business partners. Just family. Emily's father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Her brother, now fully recovered, stood beside Nathan as his best man. When the minister asked if they entered the marriage freely, Nathan answered before anyone expected. More freely than I've ever chosen anything. Everyone laughed. Emily squeezed his hand. This wedding felt completely different from the first. Not because the flowers were prettier. Not because the ceremony was grander. But because every promise spoken that day had already been proven through countless ordinary moments. The quiet breakfasts. The shared grief. The patient waiting. The courage to become vulnerable. Love hadn't appeared in one dramatic instant. It had grown quietly between 2 people who kept choosing kindness, even when they believed the story had an expiration date. Years later, visitors still admired the photograph hanging above the fireplace. It showed Nathan and Emily laughing during their second wedding. Few people knew there had been another ceremony before it. Fewer still understood why that first marriage had mattered. Because sometimes the strongest love story doesn't begin with 2 people falling in love. Sometimes it begins with 2 wounded hearts pretending not to. And by the time they finally tell the truth, they realize the love they were afraid to name had already become the safest place either of them had ever known.